Hi everybody! In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this little butterfly, this little dangly butterfly with a marquise shaped cabochon. So what you are going to notice is the stone that I work with in the beginning of the tutorial is different because I actually drop and break it like in the middle of the tutorial, and then I have to switch to this other stone. So that's why it's gonna look different, but yes, this is a cute little butterfly, and if you want to see how I made it, just keep watching. So my stone is an Amazonite and it is a marquise shape. This is the shape that you need. You need a marquise shaped stone, and I am gonna measure mine. So it's just a little bit over an inch, and in millimeters it's probably like 27 millimeters. Yours doesn't have to be this exact size, just roughly like a small marquise stone, depending on the size of the pendant you want to make, of course. So then I'm going to be using some round wire. This is 20 gauge round copper. You can use square wire if you want, but if you have square, you can just use 20 gauge square. So I have two pieces and they are 9 inches long. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go down a little bit. Let me measure what that is. So I'm gonna go down 2 inches, and I'm going to use some half round wire. You can use 22 gauge or 24 gauge half round wire. This one's 24. I know I typically use 22, so you can definitely use that as well. I just happened to grab my 24 this time around. So I'm holding it at that 2-inch mark, and you want to just wrap. So just grab a little end of the wire. It's still connected to the spool there, and I'm just wrapping around. You probably want to do at least 5 of these wraps. You can do a few more. So I'm just going to trim both of the wires so that they're both on the same side, so facing me in this case. And then I'm just going to press down with my pliers. Okay, so I was holding it at the 2-inch mark, so this is like going inwards, so this portion is now like a little bit less than 2 inches because we've, you know, put this wire onto it. So here we are going to open up these 2 wires, so hold that wrap there. Oh, and by the way, you can use, sorry, I meant to say, you can use round wire. You don't have to use half round wire. If you have half round wire, it's easier, but you're not going to notice this wire. It's going to be hidden by the stone. So I like to use round wire and weave a pattern if it's going to be noticeable, but since it's not noticeable, it doesn't matter. But if you only have round wire, then use 28 gauge or 26 gauge round wire and weave like a little pattern so it doesn't unravel, because if you just wrap around like I did here, round wire tends to unravel more because you can't like squish it down like we did with the half round. So you can absolutely do this whole design in round wire, or you can do it in square and half round. So what we're gonna do now, these are gonna be butterfly wings. So you can take something like a, you can use a pen, it'd probably be too small, maybe like a makeup brush. I've used that sometimes to make a nice rounded shape. And you would bend these around it to get the same kind of rounded shape, or you can just eyeball it, which is what I'm doing here. Essentially, you're making like a heart shape. So these are the bigger, the top wings of the butterfly. And what you want to do is just keep bending them. I'm trying to just keep them, you know, even and symmetrical, like this. And then where they touch this middle wire, I'm gonna put a bend. And so here as well, So I put a bend in them. Sorry, they're very like floppity right now. Like this. And then what you want to do is this bend, you want to just bend it all the way. Like that. Okay. And then reinforce that bend by just pressing down. So it's like a really tight bend there. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out the best way to hold this so I don't block everything with my hands, and you can see. So now, so these can move a little bit because they kind of like slide in the half round wire. So just like put it back, make sure they haven't slid so they're like not lopsided or anything. So now we're gonna make the smaller wings. Before we do that, I'm just gonna take this wire, these two pieces of wire that are like wire ends here. I'm just gonna bend them up just a tiny bit, and then I'm gonna bend them to the side. So you want them to be on top, you know, so not underneath the wings, but here on top, like that. Okay, so now we're gonna shape our smaller butterfly wings. So for the smaller butterfly wings, again, you can use like a pencil or something, but I'm just eyeballing it and I am just shaping it. As symmetrical as possible. I'm going to use my pliers here to help. All right. I think that's probably pretty good. Maybe this one's just a smidge bigger. There we go. Now it's all good. So now you have these two wires, they're on top, and they are connected to your bottom smaller wings. So now again, either weave a little weaving pattern with some 28 or 26 gauge round wire right here to connect the two wings right at the bottom there, or if you're using half round wire, then wrap it around probably about 5 or 6 wraps just to make sure it's held together nicely, and then trim off the little wire ends here in the front so that the wire ends there are also in the front facing us, and then these wire ends are in the front as well because they're all going to get covered up by the stone. So we're just going to slide that down. If you are weaving with round wire, it's harder to slide down, so if you're doing that, I would just do it on the bottom to begin with. So I'm just going to bring these two wires a little closer together so I can slide this like all the way down. There we go, just like that. And then you can see the little wire ends there, so just get in there with your pliers and just push those wire ends down so they're all here in the front. So just like that. All right, I'm gonna zoom back out a little bit. And now these two wires, we're gonna also separate them just like we did up top by just bringing one on each side like this. Okay, so now before we secure in the stone, you have a little bit of an option there. So the butterfly is just made out of 20 gauge wire, so this wire is fairly thin. So what you can do is you can kind of raise these wires out of the way, and you can do the same thing with the bottom wires if they're in your way, but they're actually not covering up my wings, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to have access to my wings if I'm going to hammer them. So I'm going to place this down on an iron block and I'm going to hammer just the bottom wings and then these top wings. You don't want to hammer these wires that are sticking out or like this portion with the little wrap. So that's why I've kind of bent them upwards so they're out of the way. And you don't have to hammer. It will just make it stronger. So I have an iron block and a chasing hammer and I'm literally kind of just like hammering, and that strengthens the wire, makes it look a little flat, and it makes it harder. So that's just an optional thing if you want to do that. All right, I'm back. So you might notice it looks a little flat where I hammered it. So we do want to just fix these wires that I've lifted up earlier. Just put them back down. I'm actually gonna try and make the bend a little sharper rather than this really rounded bend that I have here. All right, so here is our butterfly and here is our stone. And one more thing about your stone. So if you're trying to make this, you know, for example, smaller, then like your stone is smaller, then your butterfly needs to be smaller, and vice versa. If your stone is bigger, your butterfly needs to be bigger to fit it, because the stone, it's like the body of the butterfly, and you want like a little tiny bit of the stone to stick up here and a tiny bit of it to stick out down there. If your butterfly turned out to be a little big and your stone doesn't stick out, you can just kind of squish it this way. Like if it's just a tiny, this is going to make like a small difference. So obviously if it's like a huge difference, it won't be able to change the size of it this much, but it'll, you know, change it a little bit if you just need a few millimeters there. So what I'm going to do, this part is really tricky because until you lock the stone in both parts, it doesn't really stay put. Like once we lock it down here, it's not going to want to stay, it's just want to get pushed upwards. So I do like to do this bottom part first. It's easier for me personally. But yeah, your stone's not going to stay put after you do it. So just keep that in mind. So I'm squishing everything really tightly together so it doesn't come apart. I have my stone, just a little tip of it sticking out here. I have these two wires that are coming, you know, from the small butterfly wings. And so I'm bending those wires up, and then I'm taking one wire at a time and I'm putting it through the small wing there. So I'm putting it like this. So it's going through, and then kind of I'm bending it upwards. And now I'm going to do the other one. So it's going through the little wing, and then I'm bending it upwards like that. So if I stop pressing, there's been a terrible accident and my little Amazonite fell on the floor and broke. Luckily, I found another marquise stone. This is a gray moonstone, and it's very similar. I think it's like a tiny smidge taller, but it's very similar. I think this is as similar as I'm gonna get. And so we're just gonna finish off this bottom here before we do the top. So hold your stone tight so it doesn't fall out like mine and break. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna trim off this wire. My goal here is to not have a wire end that sticks out. I wanna have a wire end that ends up not in the front or the back, but just kind of like on the side, on the edge. So I am pushing that, and I'm kind of guiding that along as I wrap it around that little wing. And my little wire end ended up kind of here on the bottom, so it's not going to poke the person wearing it from the back, and it's also, you know, not sticking up or visible from the front. So that was my goal. You can always, you know, trim it trim your wire end a little shorter if you need to, if it ended up being too long and it's sticking out the back or something. So I'm just gonna guide that along, and you can kind of just press down and squish your wire end as well to make it not pokey. So let me see. You might need to adjust the little crisscross portion if it's not being symmetrical, but roughly you get this kind of like little X here in the bottom. So now we're doing the top, so we're taking each wire and we're just putting it through the wing and then up. Pretty much the same thing that we did on the bottom. So through the wing and up. I'm just pressing it on the side here. There we go. Just trying to keep the little crisscross even, like that. And again, for this top portion here, our goal is really just to focus on those little wire ends so they are just on the edge and they don't poke. So I'm just gonna trim them. And I'm just gonna kind of follow that along with my pliers, curving that wire end. And then if yours doesn't end up perfectly on the edge, that's okay, as long as you just kind of like squish it with your pliers so it becomes flat and not pokey. That's really all that you want. There we go. So here's what it looks like. My stone's a little bigger, so it sticks out a little more here at the top, but I think it still makes a good butterfly. So now we just need to make a little bail, and here is what it looks like on the back. This got a little lopsided, but that's okay. That's probably why I had such a hard time making it look even from the front, because it got uneven in the back there. So I'm just taking a piece of round wire, and it's about 3 inches long. And I'm folding it in half. Roughly, I know it's impossible to fold it like perfectly in half. We're gonna trim off the little ends and make it even, so it'll be fine. So I am squishing it like this. There we go. Perfect. And then I'm taking my bail making pliers. You can use round nose pliers. I'm just going to use this size, whatever size you want your bail to be. So if you just wrap it around, that's what you get. And then, let's see. And then I'm just trimming, see how the little wire ends are not kind of perfect there. So I'm just going to give it a trim so they are nice and even. And then I'm going to take the smaller part, the smallest part of my bail making pliers, and I'm curving this way, but I'm leaving a little gap. See the little gap? Like I didn't close that all the way, because I want to take my butterfly and I want to put that through, and then I'm gonna close. There's 2 loops because of the wire has 2 wire ends, so I'm just closing both of those loops with my pliers to close up this bail. So now the bail is attached here to the wing of the butterfly, and then here is my little dangly gray moonstone butterfly. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.